The battlefield was silent now, but not with peace. It was the silence of smoke rising, metal burning, and bodies lying still. The human commander stood tall among the ruins, his armor dented, his weapon low in his hand. He had fought for hours, side by side with his men, yet now he was alone. The war between humans and the alien huntresses had reached another bloody day, and only ash remained. Across from him, standing with steady breath, was the alien huntress. Her tall figure was shadowed by the glow of dying fire. Her silver eyes were locked on him, cold yet unreadable. Her weapon aimed at his chest, finger resting on the trigger. She had every reason to kill him, every reason to finish what the war demanded. And yet he did not raise his gun. Instead, he looked at her with something she had never seen in the eyes of an enemy. Not hatred, not anger, not fear. Something else, something dangerous, something forbidden. A strange kind of hope. "You could kill me right now," he said slowly, his voice rough from smoke. "Or you could answer me," he continued. The huntress narrowed her eyes, unsure what game this human was playing. "Answer you?" she finally asked, her voice sharp like a blade. "Yes," he said, his tone steady despite the chaos around them. "Be my wife." The words cut through the smoke and fire like lightning. The alien huntress froze, her lips parting in disbelief. She had heard human soldiers scream for mercy, for life, for surrender. But never this, never a proposal. Her grip tightened on her weapon, her heart pounding. Her silence stretched like the battlefield itself, long and heavy. The commander did not flinch. He stood tall, eyes steady on hers. He had fought in countless battles, had seen friends fall, had led men to victory and to death. But in this moment, all his courage came down to 3 words. He had seen her before, on other battlefields, always fierce, always unyielding. But today, after all the killing, he saw something else in her eyes, something human, and he knew this was his only chance. The huntress lifted her weapon higher, the blue glow of her plasma, charge humming. Her finger trembled on the trigger. To her, this was madness, an enemy who dared to ask for union instead of surrender. Her silence was her shield, her weapon, her last wall between her and betrayal. Yet something inside her cracked. She remembered the way he had fought, not with cruelty, but with honor. She remembered how he had carried a wounded soldier, even as the enemy fire rained. She remembered his voice shouting orders, not of hatred, but of survival. She had never thought humans capable of such things. And now he was asking for the impossible. The air grew thick, every second heavy with decision. Around them, the battlefield still burned, smoke coiling into the sky like dark ghosts. The silence between them became louder than war itself. The commander did not lower his gaze. "Be my wife," he repeated, softer now, but with more weight. "It is not surrender I ask for. It is a future." The huntress's heart raced, her mind a storm of battle oaths and forbidden thoughts. Her people would kill her for even listening. The humans would call him mad for asking. Yet in this moment, standing in fire and ruin, she felt something break free inside her, something she had buried for too long, a wish for something beyond war, beyond orders, beyond death. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her silence was her answer. She raised the weapon as if to fire, and the commander braced himself. But instead of striking his heart, the plasma bolt shot past him, slamming into the broken wall behind. Sparks rained down, glowing in the smoke. For a second, time itself seemed to stop. The commander realized what her silence meant. She had not killed him. She had chosen him. The huntress lowered her weapon, her eyes burning with conflict. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. Her silence was louder than any vow. The commander's chest rose with breath he did not know he was holding. He smiled faintly, tired, scarred, yet victorious in a way no battle had ever given him. He whispered one last time, his voice low and certain, "So that's how you say yes." And in the ruins of war, their story began. The sound of the plasma bolt still echoed in the ruins. It had not pierced the commander's chest. It had not ended his life. Instead, it had struck the wall behind him, sending sparks into the smoky air. For a moment, he did not move, unsure if he had been spared or if another shot was coming. But the alien huntress lowered her weapon, her silence speaking louder than anything else. She looked at him with eyes that carried storms, eyes that had seen countless battles, victories, and deaths. Yet now, those same eyes betrayed hesitation, something she had never allowed herself to feel. Her silence wrapped around them like a shield, refusing to break. The commander understood then. Her shot was not rejection. It was acceptance in her own way. He stepped forward slowly, careful not to startle her. His boots crunched against the broken glass and shattered stone. Each step felt heavier than any march across the battlefield. The huntress did not move away, but she did not come closer either. She simply stared, her weapon lowered, but not discarded. Her silence was dangerous, yet it was also intimate. It was as if she had said 1,000 words without opening her lips. The commander's chest rose and fell, his breath heavy with exhaustion and disbelief. He had gambled his life on 3 words, and somehow, impossibly, he had won. But the war outside this moment still raged. The ruins around them were filled with echoes of screams, the smell of smoke, and the weight of death. To the world, they were still enemies, sworn to destroy each other. And yet, in this silence, they had become something else. The huntress finally turned her gaze away, not in weakness, but in struggle. She could not look into his eyes without feeling the storm inside her grow. Her people had taught her that humans were liars, destroyers, creatures who brought ruin wherever they went. But this human had not lied. He had stood in front of her, unarmed in spirit, and asked for something no weapon could give. And when she had fired her shot, he had understood. That shook her more than the war itself. The commander, watching her, realized the danger of what had just happened. If any soldier, human or alien, had seen this moment, both of them would already be dead. Their silence was more dangerous than a battlefield full of weapons, because silence carried meaning, and meaning could change everything. Still, he could not let the silence last forever. "Why didn't you kill me?" he asked, his voice low, steady but searching. The huntress lifted her chin slightly, her lips parting as if to answer. But no words came. Instead, she let the silence stretch once again, and in that silence, the commander understood more than he would have from any speech. Her silence meant trust, however fragile. Her silence meant doubt, but also choice. Her silence meant she was standing at the edge of betrayal, and yet she had not stepped over it. It was an answer wrapped in fire and restraint, and he accepted it. The wind blew across the broken street, carrying with it ash and the faint echoes of distant gunfire. Somewhere out there, soldiers were still fighting, still killing, still dying. But here, in this ruined place, time seemed to bend around them. They were no longer commander and huntress, no longer human and alien. They were 2 beings caught between war and something greater, something no army could control. The commander took another slow step forward. "You don't have to say it," he whispered, his voice almost breaking. "I already know." The huntress turned back to him, her eyes narrowing, but not in anger. There was confusion there, maybe even fear. Not fear of him, but fear of herself, of what she was beginning to feel. Her silence deepened, and yet her weapon dropped lower until it finally rested at her side. That small movement was worth more than any vow. It was her yes. The commander let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He wanted to reach out, to touch her arm, to prove this was real. But he held back, knowing the line between acceptance and rejection was still razor thin. Instead, he stood still, letting the silence settle around them. It was fragile, but it was enough. For now, silence was their language, and it was louder than war. Above them, the smoke cleared just enough to reveal the night sky. Stars shone faintly through the haze, distant and eternal. The commander looked up, and then back at her. "Someday," he said softly, "we won't need to hide." The huntress said nothing, but for the first time, her eyes softened. And in that moment, he knew her silent shot had been the answer he never expected. It was the beginning of something both of them could not yet understand. But it was real, and it was theirs. And as the battlefield burned around them, the silence between them carried more hope than any victory ever had. The night after the silent shot was not quiet for either of them. The commander walked through the ruins of the human camp, his men believing he had simply gone scouting. He carried no report, no map, no orders. Only a memory of silver eyes and a plasma shot that had missed on purpose. A secret that weighed heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. On the other side of the battlefield, the alien huntress sat in the shadows of her war tent. Her sisters whispered around the fire, speaking of victories and hunting trophies. But she said nothing, her weapon resting across her knees. She replayed the moment again and again, the human's words burning inside her mind. "Be my wife." No human had ever dared speak such madness, and yet his voice would not leave her. For days, they fought as enemies in daylight, but in the silence of night, they searched for each other. It was not with words, not with signals, only with glances stolen across smoke and fire. When their armies clashed, their eyes always found each other. In the chaos of battle, they became shadows dancing closer and closer, until the distance between them was no longer just the length of a battlefield. It was something far deeper, far more dangerous. The commander knew the truth. If his men discovered his secret, he would be branded a traitor. The council would strip him of his command, maybe even his life. He had sworn oaths to defend humanity, not to fall in love with the enemy. But love does not ask permission. It arrives like fire in dry grass, and once it begins, nothing can stop the burning. The huntress carried the same burden. Her sisters followed the code of blood. They were raised to kill humans without mercy, to see them as prey. And yet, when she closed her eyes, she saw not prey, but the commander standing tall, unyielding and honest. Her silence had betrayed her kind, and she knew it. But every time she thought of turning away, she remembered his eyes. Eyes that had not begged, but had offered. Eyes that had looked at her not as a weapon, not as an enemy, but as something more. Their secret bond grew in stolen moments. At night, when the battlefield fell quiet, they would meet where no soldier dared wander. The broken ruins of a city that both armies had abandoned. There, among shattered walls and broken machines, they stood face to face. No swords drawn, no weapons raised. Only silence and the sound of their hearts. The commander spoke softly, careful with every word. "We cannot be discovered," he said. "If they find out, they will kill us both." The huntress gave no reply, but her silence was an answer in itself. She already knew her people would not forgive her, just as his people would not forgive him. Their bond was more forbidden than any act of war. And yet, the danger only made it stronger. One night, as ash fell from the sky like black snow, the commander stepped closer to her. He did not touch her, but his presence was enough. "Why didn't you kill me that day?" he asked again, his voice a low whisper. The huntress looked at him, her silver eyes sharp yet soft. Her lips parted, but she gave no sound. Instead, she placed her hand over her chest, where her heart beat fast and strong. That was her answer, not in words but in silence. The commander's breath caught. His own hand twitched, wanting to reach for hers. But he held back, knowing one step too far could break everything. Still, that single gesture carved itself into his soul. Her silence had been her yes, but her heart was her vow. In that moment, he realized their bond was no longer a fragile spark. It had become a fire, hidden but unstoppable. Yet fire always leaves smoke, and smoke is always seen. Rumors began to spread. Among the aliens, whispers stirred that the strongest huntress had grown distracted, her aim not as sharp, her silence longer than before. Among the humans, murmurs rose that their commander's eyes wandered too often, that he hesitated at critical moments. Neither side had proof, but suspicion was its own weapon. It cut sharper than any blade. The commander and the huntress knew their time was running short. But still, they met in the ruins. Still, they stood together under the stars. Every meeting was a risk, every glance a rebellion. The war had taken everything from them, yet in its ashes, it had given them this forbidden bond. Something no army, no oath, no law could erase. And though neither dared to speak the word aloud, they both knew the truth. They had already chosen each other. Their silence was no longer just an answer. It had become their secret vow. And in the heart of war, their forbidden bond was born. The days after their secret vow grew darker. The battlefield did not rest, and neither did the eyes of those who watched. Rumors had already taken shape, like shadows crawling where light could not reach. Soldiers on both sides began to notice small things, things that should not matter, but always did. The alien huntress no longer struck with her old fire. Her sisters whispered in their camp that her silence was too long, that her gaze wandered when it should be sharp. They began to follow her movements, to question her orders. One asked her, half in jest but sharp as a blade, "Do you see humans now as prey, or as something else?" The huntress did not reply. Her silence was her only defense. But her silence was also dangerous, because silence could hide anything. On the human side, the commander was no safer. His men had fought beside him long enough to know when his focus slipped. They saw how sometimes, in the chaos of fire and steel, his eyes searched the smoke as if for someone unseen. One soldier muttered, "He hesitates. He is looking for something that isn't victory." Another said, or someone, the words spread quietly, poisoning the air of loyalty. Neither the commander nor the huntress could stop the storm that was rising. At night, they still met in the ruins of the abandoned city. But even there, shadows followed. The commander once caught a glimpse of movement on a rooftop, a figure gone too quickly to identify. The huntress, too, noticed footprints in the ash where no soldier should have been. They were being watched, hunted not by enemies, but by their own. The tension grew sharper when the ambush came. It was deep in the ruins, where the broken towers leaned like dying giants. The commander had slipped through the smoke to find her. The huntress had come from the other side, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. But before either could speak, the silence shattered. Figures emerged from the shadows, soldiers of both armies. Humans on one side, aliens on the other, all weapons aimed at the pair who were never meant to stand together. The commander's heart pounded as he raised his rifle. The huntress lifted her plasma weapon, but her eyes never left his. It was a trap, and they both knew it. The world had finally seen their secret, and now the world wanted blood. The first shot came from the human side, a bullet cutting through the air. The commander reacted instantly, firing back, his voice shouting commands though no soldiers were left to obey. The huntress moved like lightning, her plasma bolts searing through the night. They fought back to back, their enemies closing in. For the first time, they did not hide their bond. They did not hide their trust. Every movement was in rhythm. Every strike was a vow. Two armies had come to kill them, and together they answered with fire. The ruins shook with explosions. Sparks lit the night. Flames roared against stone. The commander reloaded, his hands steady though death pressed close. The huntress snarled as she struck down one of her own sisters, her heart breaking, but her choice made. She could not deny it any longer. Her silence had turned into action. Her shot was not for the humans, not for her people. It was for him, and for the bond they had chosen. When the smoke cleared, only bodies lay scattered across the ruins. The commander and the huntress stood bloodied, exhausted, but alive. The ambush had failed, but the cost was heavy. Now there was no going back, no more hiding in shadows. Their people would know, both armies would come for them. The world itself had turned against them. The commander looked at her, his chest heaving, his face cut and bruised. "Now they will hunt us both," he said, his voice hoarse. The huntress met his gaze, her weapon still smoking. Her silence was her answer, but this time it was not fear. It was strength. It was her vow made louder than words. They had fought together, killed together, survived together, and the world had seen it. The bond that was once forbidden was now undeniable. But they were no longer just a man and a huntress. They had become something greater, something the war could not explain, a force born in fire and silence, a vow written in blood and ashes. And though the hunt had begun, neither of them looked away, because they knew no army, no trap, no world could stop what they had chosen. The ruins still smoked from the ambush, but neither the commander nor the huntress rested. They knew this was only the beginning. The soldiers they had fought were only scouts, shadows of the storm that was coming. Now both armies would move, both armies would hunt. And yet, instead of fear, a strange calm settled between them. They had fought together, and in that battle, something greater had been sealed. The commander leaned against a broken wall, his rifle heavy in his hands. His armor was cracked, his body bruised, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. The huntress stood nearby, her plasma weapon cooling in the cold night air, her silver eyes still sharp, but no longer distant. They were alive, together, and that was more than either expected. The silence stretched between them, thick but not empty. Finally, the commander broke it, his voice raw but steady. "We can't wait for peace," he said. "We may not live to see it." He looked at her, the firelight dancing across his scarred face. "So I'll ask you again, be my wife, not tomorrow, not after the war, but now." The words were madness, but they were also truth. The huntress froze, her heart pounding like a war drum. Her people would never forgive. His people would call him traitor. But in this moment, none of that mattered. She raised her weapon, not to fire, but to hold it close to her chest. Her silence was fierce, stronger than any vow spoken aloud. Before she could answer with action, the night exploded with thunder. Missiles struck the ruins, fire erupted, and both armies surged in from the shadows. Humans on one side, aliens on the other, weapons blazing in the darkness. The commander and the huntress were trapped between two storms. Enemies closing in with rage, shouting for blood. There was no escape, no chance to hide, but instead of retreating, the commander shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Then fight with me, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as one." The huntress gave no words, but she stepped forward, back to back with him once again. Her plasma bolts lit the night sky. His rifle roared with fire. Together, they became a storm inside the storm. Every strike, every shot, every breath was a vow. The soldiers screamed, charging from both sides. Blades clashed, fire burst, stones shattered under the force of war. The commander moved like a man who had already made his choice. His every step was to protect her. Every bullet meant to carve their path. The huntress struck with fury. Her silence turned into fire. Her weapon cut down even her sisters because her choice was made. The war had taken her loyalty, but love had given her something greater. Amid the chaos, as bodies fell and fire reigned, the commander's voice rose once more. "Be my wife, not after victory, not after survival. Now, in this fire." His words were louder than the guns, louder than the screams. And the huntress answered, not with words, but with action. She turned, striking down a soldier who raised his blade toward him. Then she touched her weapon to his rifle, crossing them together in the flames. Her silence was her vow. Her fire was her yes. The battlefield around them faltered. Both human and alien soldiers hesitated, staring in disbelief. They saw not enemies, but two warriors fighting as one. The bond was undeniable, a vow made in the open, in fire and blood. It was treason to both armies, but it was truth to them. And in that moment, their love became something greater than war. Explosions thundered again, and the enemies surged forward. But the commander and the huntress did not step back. They carved through the battlefield like a single blade. Their bond was no longer hidden, no longer silent. It was fire, it was vow, it was rebellion. Every shot, every strike said what their lips could not. We have chosen each other, and nothing can break this vow. By the time the night ended, the ruins were covered in ash and silence. The enemies had retreated, but not defeated. They would return, stronger, angrier, relentless. But the commander and the huntress stood together, weapons low, hearts burning. The vow had been made, not in peace, not in ceremony, but under fire. And it was stronger than any oath spoken before an army. They had chosen each other in the heart of war. And no army, no world could unmake that vow. The vow under fire spread faster than smoke. Neither army could deny what they had seen. A human commander and an alien huntress standing together, fighting as one. It was not rumor anymore, it was truth burned into the battlefield. In the human camp, the council was furious. Their commander, once their symbol of strength, had betrayed the blood oath of his people. He has chosen an alien over his own kind. One officer spat. He is no longer a leader. He is a traitor, another declared. Orders were sent across every channel. Hunt him, kill him if he resists. There would be no forgiveness, no mercy. In the alien stronghold, the huntress faced the same rage. Her sisters spoke of shame, of blood dishonored. The strongest among us has fallen to weakness. Their leader roared. She has allowed the enemy into her heart. She has abandoned her vow to the hunt. They marked her as a traitor, a target to be destroyed. Her name, once spoken with respect, became cursed in their camp. The world had turned against them, both human and alien. And yet, in the ruins where they met, they stood unbroken. The commander looked at her, his jaw set, his eyes burning with resolve. They will not stop, he said. They will come for us with everything. The huntress gave no words, but her silence was steady. She knew, and yet she did not falter. Her eyes told him the truth. She would not leave his side. The hunt began with fire. Every ruin, every forest, every starship wreck was searched. Scouts and assassins moved like shadows. Every night, the commander and the huntress were forced to run. Through rivers of ash, through crumbling cities, through wastelands lit by burning skies. The world itself seemed to close around them. But wherever they went, they fought side by side. When human soldiers ambushed them in a canyon, the commander shielded her with his armor. When alien assassins struck from the shadows, the huntress cut them down with lightning speed. They did not fight for armies anymore. They fought only for each other. Every battle was proof of their bond. Every survival a vow repeated. The more they were hunted, the stronger their bond became. The commander no longer hid his words. I would rather die with you than live without you, he told her one night, his voice steady. The huntress did not speak, but she pressed her hand against his chest, where his heart beat strong. That was her answer, silent, powerful, unshakable. Their rebellion grew louder. Each time they survived, each time they escaped, stories spread. Whispers began in both camps. Whispers of two warriors who could not be killed. Some said they were cursed, others said they were blessed. But all agreed on one thing. They were unstoppable together, and fear began to spread, because fear is more dangerous than any weapon. The Council of Humans tightened its grip. They're a threat to order, to discipline, to victory, they declared. The alien leaders echoed the same words. They're proof that loyalty can break, that love can destroy our cause. Both sides prepared for something greater than a hunt. They prepared for war against the two who had defied the world. One night, surrounded in the ruins of a broken starship, the commander and the huntress found themselves trapped again. This time it was not scouts, not assassins. It was an army, human and alien both, marching from different directions, but with the same goal, to destroy the pair who had broken every rule. The commander stood tall, his rifle in his hands, his body weary but his spirit unyielding. The huntress raised her weapon, her silence sharp as steel. Around them, torches burned, shadows stretched, weapons glowed in the dark. It was the world itself rising against them. And yet, in that moment, neither felt fear, because they had already chosen, because they knew their vow was stronger than death. The commander turned to her, his voice low but firm. "If this is the end, then we face it together." The huntress gave no reply, but her eyes burned like fire. Her silence was enough. Her silence was always enough. And as the armies closed in, as the night shook with the sound of war, the world prepared to crush them. But they stood unbroken, because love had made them rebels. And together, they had become something no world could control. The ruins trembled as the armies closed in. On one side, human soldiers marched with rifles raised, their faces set in cold determination. On the other, alien huntresses advanced, their eyes glowing with fury, their weapons crackling with deadly power. And in the center of it all stood the commander and the huntress, back to back, weapons ready, hearts steady. The air burned with tension. Shouts filled the night. Drums of war pounded in the distance. This was not an ambush, not a skirmish. This was the end. The world had come to erase them, to destroy what should never have existed. Their love had become rebellion. Their bond had become a spark too dangerous to allow. The commander looked at the huntress, his face lit by firelight, his voice rough but clear. "This is where it ends," he said, "but if we fall together." The huntress turned her head, her silver eyes meeting his. Her silence wrapped around him like a vow. She did not need words, because her silence had always meant yes. The first shot came from a human line. A blast of energy followed from the alien side. The battlefield erupted with chaos, fire raining from both directions. But instead of running, the commander lifted his rifle and roared into the storm. The huntress unleashed her plasma fire, each strike burning like thunder. Together they became a wall, two warriors standing against the world. The soldiers surged, blades clashing, guns firing. The commander fought with every ounce of strength, his body screaming with pain, his spirit unbroken. The huntress struck with deadly grace, faster, fiercer than she had ever been. Every step they took was side by side, every strike a vow repeated in blood and fire. Neither spoke, but neither needed to, because in the chaos, silence was louder than war. But the armies were endless. For every enemy they cut down, two more appeared. The battlefield was a sea of rage, a storm without end. The commander's rifle grew hot, his hands shaking. The huntress bled from cuts along her arms, her breath sharp and heavy. Yet still they stood, unyielding, because to give up now would be to betray everything. The enemy surrounded them at last. A circle of fire and steel, weapons raised, voices shouting for death. It was over, and both knew it. The commander glanced at her, his heart steady despite the end, and he whispered, "One last time, say yes." The huntress raised her weapon, her hands trembling, her silence heavy. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then she lifted her plasma rifle high. Not at him, not at the soldiers, but at the sky. She fired a single shot, a bolt of fire that tore through the smoke and darkness. It was not a shot of war, not a strike of death. It was a signal, a vow, a defiance. Her silent yes. The armies froze, stunned by the act. For the first time, the battlefield fell quiet. The commander understood, his chest tightening with fierce pride. She had not spoken the word, but she had said it louder than anyone could. The shot into the sky was her vow before the world. She had chosen him, chosen their bond, even in the face of death. And in that moment, the silence became a roar that no army could silence. The soldiers hesitated, their weapons still raised, but their courage faltered. Some lowered their guns, confused, afraid of what they were witnessing. Others shouted in rage, calling them traitors, demanding blood. But the moment had already changed everything. What was once forbidden was now undeniable. The commander and the huntress had stood against the world. And in their defiance, they had carved their place into history. The commander lowered his rifle, his eyes never leaving hers. "So that's how you say yes," he whispered, his voice steady even as the armies closed again. The huntress gave no reply, but her silence was enough. Her silence had always been enough. And though fire and death surrounded them, though the world itself had risen against them, they stood unbroken, hand in hand, hearts bound. Their love was the spark that could not be killed. And long after the war ended, long after armies fell, their story would be told in whispers. The tale of the commander and the huntress, of a vow made in silence, and of the silent yes that changed everything.